Thank you so much, Nisha, for that fantastically warm introduction. My name is Kerry Nutley. I'm the Director for HCM Strategy at Oracle for the UK and Ireland. I'm so pleased that we could join you in this virtual conference today to talk to you about AI at work, and I'll shortly be joined by Clive Swan, who's the Oracle Senior Vice President for Applications and Development. And trust me, if there's anything about AI and Clive doesn't know it, well then it's just not worth knowing. So I'm really excited that Clive is joining us today. We very much started the journey with you trying to talk about discussing AI at work, and Yaz joined you at your conference last year. But as part of the discussions through the year, we realised that there was a perception within the PPMA member group that maybe local government was slightly further behind the curve in terms of adoption. So what we wanted to do was to work with you and really test this synopsis. So what we thought we'd do is take the Oracle's Global AI at Work survey and rerun it with PPMA members to see whether your adoptions, your perceptions were similar to that of the UK and our global respondents. So that's what we did just before the potential conference last year between March and February, and we also met up with a few of you in your local meetings and had a chat in terms of focus groups about how you felt about AI, how you felt it was being adopted in local authorities, and that's what we're going to take you through today. But before I do that, why don't we all get a couple of feedback from you in terms of where you think you are on your AI journey?
Hi, my name's Sarah Shercliffe and I'm the Director for People at Norfolk County Council. What do I think about AI? It's critical, isn't it? So in an organisation where we can make ourselves more productive, more effective in our decision making, then why would we not use technology to aid some of our problem solving and decision making, which supports our managers to do the best job that they can do?
My name is Gordon Mcfarland. I'm Assistant Director in Leicestershire County Council, responsible for managing a number of support services. We've got quite an ambitious digital agenda that we're just embarking on. It's inevitable that AI is going to play a part in that, but there'll be lots of other factors to consider as we go through our digital journey. I think there's lots of positive applications for AI in particular. What we have to be careful about is that lots of our services relate to people, relate to vulnerable people, and we have to really think carefully about effectively digital and computers replacing human contact. So there's a real balance to what we're doing.
Hi, my name is Chris Squire. I'm the Director of HR and Organisational Development at Somerset County Council. Feelings on artificial intelligence in the workplace, for us it's an evolving thing, very much about the voice of the resident and actually how we bring the resident into Somerset County Council, make us more accessible and transparent. I think in terms of my approach to AI and what that means for our staff, it's all about education, development opportunities, what's the potential for this, where do we need to move fast on stuff, where we might need to consider how we equip our colleagues across the organisation, our partner organisations, and then also our residents as well. So have they got the skills actually that they need to help improve their own lives and therefore connect themselves to us at the council and the county council back to them? So that's what I'm looking at.
Thank you so much, and also a big thank you for those people that participated in some of the videos that we did in the focus groups. So let's just talk about the survey. So Oracle every year runs a survey called AI at Work. And as part of your goodie bag, not only can you see the total PPMA responses, but you can get a link to that survey too. And the great news is we'll be doing a refresh of that survey in the next couple of months. So please look out for communications on that as well. The survey that we compared the PPMA responses to was conducted in 2019. The Oracle survey is completed globally with over 8,000 HR leaders and their employees, and it covers 10 countries. So that's countries from Australia to China to Japan, us here in the UK, and other European countries like France, etc. We offered the same set of survey questions to the PPMA members, of which there were 650. 29 people completed the survey, and we had a further 14 members take part as part of the focus groups. And we ran that at the early part of this year, having the intention that we would be with you at the conference in April, but unfortunately, as we all know, that wasn't possible. So we do need to be clear that obviously statistically this is not a full perception of PPMA members, but just of the people that very much took part. But we still think it gives us some good insight and does reflect some of the conversations that we've had with you previously. The other interesting difference that we have is that a lot of the respondents that we got was predominantly female compared to the survey, which was around a 50-50 split. So anyway, let's go through that survey and let's find out some of the similarities between the PPMA and that global survey. So interestingly, overall, the PPMA response is using AI the same amount. So this whole perception that local government is behind the rollout of AI is actually something that we didn't find to be true. So the PPMA response is saying 43% were not using AI in the workplace, was same as the UK general response of 42%. It was slightly higher globally at 50% of the respondents saying that they weren't using AI. And we really did see this in some of the kind of Asian PAC areas like China. India had quite a high usage, as well as countries, as you expect, like Japan. Where companies and organisations were using AI, again, the PPMA was similar. So it was things like training, not using it at all, as obviously our first question said, but also collating information on employees and customers. And if you think about it, that's not something that's new. With a background in marketing, I remember Tesco's bringing out their club card, which I think was kind of one of our first kind of consumer experiences of AI as data on customers was being collated. And I'm sure in local government, you're looking at AI in terms of citizens' questions, FAQs on your websites as well. So the other thing about the survey was there was a similar perception around the need for all organisations to ask permission on the use of data. Again, we weren't surprised by this because of the very prominent use of the GDPR regulations and this becoming part of our culture and how we use data in our organisations, both in the UK, in local government and globally as well. Other similarities that we saw. The other similarities that we saw was that the concerns for security breaches on AI, there was some concern. And again, the PPMA had some responses to that. And we kind of saw again that the PPMA was similar, that the responsibility for AI should sit within the IT function. And I think generally as a population, we have a lot of trust within our IT colleagues to ensure that data is kept correctly within policy and guidelines. So again, we weren't surprised with that response. The interesting thing as well was that the PPMA didn't see AI as being a capability to take order taking in terms of a trust capability, but very much saw it coming in place to take on admin tasks like admin in terms of booking tasks. But interestingly, the PPMA were very keen to use AI on where to go. And I know, having met with you at previous meetings, that we've often talked about sat-nav and the use of sat-nav and Google Maps. And I think we're very much kind of addicted to that in the UK to get us from where we need to go A to B. So again, we weren't surprised in that response. So overall, we could see quite a few similarities, but taking our brief in terms of were kind of local authorities ahead or behind the curve. We actually saw that you were very similar in terms of your perceptions of AI. And when I bring in Clive, I think he's going to really demystify AI at work. The other thing that we saw regarding the survey was the use of AI at home. And so actually the PPMA are using AI more than the kind of UK responses that we had at 68% compared to the UK using AI at home 52, and globally was also 52. So where we were seeing uses was Alexa. So we've obviously quite got some Alexa fans here in the PPMA conference, the digital assistants, and obviously smart applications. Slightly behind on smart home, if you can imagine, probably not fully connected yet here in the UK with smart homes, but obviously some people connecting their light switches and various bits and pieces, doorbells to their smart homes as well. So we were really pleased to see that there was quite a, an increase of use of AI at the home and an acceptance of that type of technology. The other thing that we saw in terms of differences was really regarding the excitement. So believe it or not, you guys were more excited about using AI at work than the UK or the global respondents. Interestingly, though, what came out both in the survey and the focus group, and you saw the videos, was that there's generally excitement to use AI, there's generally a passion. But what we're hearing is that at the moment, whether it's a strategic priority, is that the momentum within the local authorities, for some, maybe isn't there in terms of hiring and getting the correct skills in terms of supporting AI. So I know, having spoken to a lot of you, it's something that you're keen to do. In terms of priorities, maybe it's quite not up on the local authority must-have lists. And also some of the focus groups, you talked about adoptions and risk of putting these things in place, which were things that you were working through locally with both yourselves, the ID department, and change management. We also saw that, again, I don't know if this comes back to the sat nav, but where you saw AI having the most impact in being positive was with your partner or spouse. I must say that the evolution of Google Maps has meant the arguing over directions in my household has definitely reduced, and I've now just got to get the left and right correct if I'm reading it from my phone, and then we should be perfect. So in terms of positive relationships, I don't know if you were like me, but it's not surprising that we see the most use of PPMA members is at home, and it's improving relationships with partners and spouses as well. So the other core differences that we saw, and I think it does pull on the last video that we just showed you, is that you don't see overall that AI will replace the role of a person. And I think definitively in the work that you do with citizens, with your constituents, the need for human contact, the need for empathy, and a lot of the tasks you actually deliver in terms of frontline services is critical. And here you did stand out, as you can see from that first graph, as it's no, you don't think that AI will replace managers in the future. Interestingly, though, you did think that there were certain questions that an AI could take the lead on, as well as kind of the diary management, the note taking that I mentioned before. We found it quite interesting that you actually saw it was where you wanted unbiased information or confidential information. You would find it you would be happier asking a form of AI, maybe that was a digital assistant, rather than having those conversations with managers directly. So maybe that's just a kind of piece of sourcing of data first before you go and have the qualification question. That was just maybe something we took away as a point of difference. Interestingly, at no point compared to the rest of the global survey or the UK survey did you see AI taking over from HR in local government. So that's great to see that there's still capabilities and empathy and the human need in HR. So that was a definitive no on that one from our PPMA members, as you can see in that graph beneath us. So that was lovely. just finishing up then on the benefits, and as I said, there is more of the research and more of the questions in your takeaway in the actual report. You saw having the most benefits from AI, and again, this was reflected both within the survey, in the focus groups, but also our customers like Lambeth Council, Croydon Council, that are taking our services. The benefits they're seeing is freeing up people from administrative tasks in the HR function, giving them time to focus on value-added activities. Some of this is driving organisational changes and obviously increasing skill capability further up into that strategy area, rather than the constant questions that we get as HR practitioners in terms of how much leave do I have, what's the maternity policy, etc. So I think there we saw the PPMA survey seeing those as key benefits, and that's fantastic, because I think if we ask some of our customers in the local authority space, this is where they're actually seeing that come through to fruition as well. So that is a kind of quick whip through of some of the survey responses in terms of similarities. So you're so not behind the curve in terms of your AI adoption. And on this point, I did want to ask Clive Swan, the Senior Vice President of Applications Development at Oracle, to talk us through kind of AI and what he sees in the marketplace as a really subject matter expert. If I can just ask Clive to join me on his video.
Yeah. Hi there, Kerry.
Hello, Clive. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we started, Kerry, can I just comment? I thought it was very funny, the comment on the sat-navs reducing arguments, because in my household, all that's done now is we've moved from arguing about directions to arguing about whether Waze or Google Maps is better. We've just changed the argument rather than removed it, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember when the sat-nav came out and it said, come off the motorway, go over the roundabout and get back on. And your husband's looking at you in my case, or my partner's looking at me going, that was a complete waste of time. And I'm just shaking the phone at him going, it told me so. So yeah, we never quite get there, but as they say, we'll get there eventually.
Exactly.
Literally, fantastic. So Clive, can you just give us a little bit more insight about the group that you run within Oracle and the remit that they have, because it's really exciting in terms of the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kerry. And first of all, again, thanks. Very, very happy to be here, and I'm pleased to be able to enjoy, join the PPMA conference in this virtual forum in the current challenging times. But as to my group, so the team I lead now in Oracle is responsible for developing AI and machine learning solutions embedded in our enterprise applications across HR, finance, and customer experience. And at the same time, most importantly, we're also chartered with enabling the rest of the applications development team, which is many thousands of engineers, to build those solutions as well. So my team comprises a series of functional domain experts in HR, finance, and customer experience. It comprises engineers, as you'd expect, and most importantly, it comprises a series of data scientists who go and do the heavy lifting in the AI and ML front. And we're delivering solutions that run in our cloud applications, delivering real value immediately, or at least we hope they will, without requiring our customers to have those expensive data scientists themselves.
That's fantastic. And you brought in another term there, AI and ML. Would you just be able to tell us what that means and how in more detail we're applying this to HR, finance, and in customer experience?
Absolutely. So dangerous thing to start defining what AI is, because it's often a very big debate in technical circles. But broadly, AI is essentially AI and machine learning is really software simulating human intelligence. And the best way to illustrate that, I think, is to compare it with traditional rules-based software. So rules-based software has been great for fully predictable, repeatable, deterministic problems. You're going to work for 20 hours at 15 hours, 15 pounds per hour pay rate. Therefore, we're going to pay you £300. And that's a perfect rules-based problem. The problem with rules-based solutions is they don't adapt and learn over time. So if the pay rate changes, you've got to go in and change the rule in the software for it to then reflect the change in pay rate. And so where rules-based software has not been good is where outcomes are less well-defined, or where the best outcomes keep changing. It could be, for example, figuring out what's the best training course for an employee based on their current position, and their aspirations in their career development. Or it might be in your help desk centre trying to understand what this email is actually asking you for. Right. So what AI and ML solutions do is they complement the raw solutions. And so, for example, with machine learning, it learns from ongoing interactions and adapts. So in the case of recommending training courses, machine learning will recommend a course to an employee. It will then assess the outcome of that course downstream, decide whether that's successful or not. If it's a successful outcome, it will recommend that course again in the future. If it's not successful, it'll try something different. So the software adapts itself without you having to go in and do things. And AI is also really good at interpreting content such as text and images. So it can understand what you mean by this email to the HR help desk. Now, you asked as well about what we're doing, how we're applying that in HR, finance, and customer experience. And really our approach comprises three strands. We're developing what we call AI apps, adaptive intelligent applications. These are functional solutions seamlessly embedded in the applications, delivering up functional recommendations to professional, self-service, and casual users. Example of that would be, I can predict the time to hire when a recruiter creates a job rec, helping that recruiter decide where to prioritize which job recs they should focus on first. In ERP and accounts payable, I can predict which suppliers will give you the best saving if you pay them early to help you optimize your cash flow. And in customer experience, in B2B sales, I can predict the next action that is most likely to increase your chances of winning that deal in due course. So that's AI apps. The second strand is intelligent UX. This is where we're moving away from a kind of one-size-fits-all user experience to one that's tailored to your individual usage. By a series of AI-based nudges, we'll push you towards more efficient application navigation through the application. So we'll push recommended actions to both professional and self-service users based on your pattern of usage and the pattern of usage of workers like you. And the third strand of our strategy is delivering digital assistants. That's where and you've talked about them already in the survey, where we're bringing that consumer style user experience where you don't have to log into the application to actually engage with it. And we're delivering all of those solutions pervasively across the suite, hence why we refer to it as pervasive AI.
It sounds really, really interesting and so much going on. So it sounds to me that I have to get my teeth into this one. Pervasive AI is going to make AI more ubiquitous for users to use, and I think it'll be seamless. So you probably won't know that you're using it as you have that experience, whether that's a customer or employee with an organisation. As you know, we completed the survey with the PPMA members on AI and their comfort levels with using it. How do you see this more globally in terms of people adopting AI? Do you see a change in that rate in terms of organisations picking up the use of this technology? And do you see people adopting that willingly or reluctantly? How do you see, both organisations and users using this technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think there's always some reluctance or wariness to adopt new technology, and I think with AI there has been a fear in certain circles, especially around risk jobs. But the reality is, and I think your survey alluded to this earlier, where the majority of AI solutions are going to automate existing administrative tasks that rules-based software can't do. So rather than replacing people in the enterprise, the AI solutions we're going to deliver are going to very much augment them, taking away, if you like, the grunt work, the repetitive, boring work, enabling those workers to become much more strategic in their roles. And so in terms of my experience with our customers, across the board now, I'm seeing customers are interested in deploying AI. In many cases, they don't know what it involves. They just want to, quote, do some AI. And certainly the area where I think which has got the most traction at the moment, where many people are dipping their toes in the water first, is around the deployment of digital assistants. And as for the end users, my experience is they're becoming more comfortable with the concept of AI, especially as they use it in their own homes, as many of the PPMA users have been doing so. And I think the stigma and fear of AI is eroding as they start to realize that actually it's not a threat to their roles, it's actually a way to augment those roles, to free them up from that grunt work, so they can go and do more value add, more enjoyable, more strategic tasks.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, and we're seeing some, when we speak to customers, that's what we're seeing, that they're not, from an HR perspective, you can't take a quarter of a person out, we can't cut off arms and legs, but what we're seeing is that these people are being applied to the jobs that we never had time to get to, or we're lifting them up to do more strategic time, or just giving back people thinking space. I know, especially for our, the local government's been so busy responding to the current market and pandemic situation. If we can get rid of some of that grunt work, as you said, the admin tasks, that would be fantastic. So what would you see from your role, because I know you've been kind of leading the charge in AI for many years, has been some of the adoption issues, or has it been kind of plain sailing and everyone's picked it up? What have been the kind of things that we don't talk about much?
No, it hasn't been plain sailing at all. In fact, we're seeing more and more successful examples, but most organisations, frankly, I think, are still struggling. And history of AI is littered with failed projects. Why do I think why has that been so? I think, well, first of all, it's hard. This stuff is hard to do. It requires a really top-notch technical team of expensive and scarce resources like data scientists and domain experts. Most AI solutions require a lot of good data, high quality data, very current data, and so forth, which that itself sounds easy. It's actually quite hard to pull together in any organization. And lastly, I think one of the reasons it's proved hard is that we need to focus, or any organization needs to focus on the right problems to solve at a given point in time. And that last point is probably the key one. So many of the AI projects that have failed because the temptation of going for that moonshot, going for that immediate huge project where you're going to replace the CFO with a robot, if you like. They go for that moonshot. It's so exciting. It appeals to a C-level executive. But the reality is, they try to deliver the moonshot without delivering first the less glamorous, the less sexy, less exciting kind of basic building blocks that are needed to enable that moonshot. And we ourselves, and when I started this group, I'm not going to tell you where, but we made a mistake ourselves in that regard, where we went for what turned out to be a moonshot, and we stepped back from that. So we've developed a methodology. We refer to it as AI journeys now, where the objective is to deliver cumulative value over time. We focus on a series of business processes, and we start to deliver value on each business process by focusing on those small kind of prerequisite steps. They all add value, and what's interesting, if you focus on a load of them in the same business process, the compounding value is greater than the sum of the individual value parts. So the aggregate value grows as we build more components along a journey in a given business flow. And then at the end, we can build that moonshot, but we can deliver value along the way. So an example of that would be, we're working on, one example we'll talk about later is hiring, recruiting. The moonshot would be that we deliver an AI solution that enables you to hire the best employees who will stay in the organization for as long as you want them. That is the moonshot. Doesn't sound like a moonshot, but it's actually a moonshot. So what are we doing with starting on recruiting? Well, I'll talk about that a bit later, but in terms of that journey, we've started by focusing on a few things. We want to reduce the cost and the time taking in some parts of the recruitment process. So we focused on cutting down the time to triage the CVs when they first come in against a job rec, just to say who you're going to shortlist for a phone screen or a first interview. We're focusing on predicting how long it's going to take you to fill a job rec, so a recruiter can help prioritize their time. And we're building on this business process. We've got a journey around recruiting, and over time we'll add more and more, and eventually we'll deliver that, bringing best employees who'll stay for a long time, but we're not going to deliver it immediately. And frankly, anybody who says they will, I think, is probably making a mistake of trying to go for the moonshot. And so in the HR space, we've got a series of journeys across recruitment, talent management, learning, onboarding, and core HR. So we're just working on one journey, we've got multiple journeys.
I really love that, because I know when I speak to customers, and we recommend that they deploy our CRM, our HCM systems in phases. And as you said, the first phase for us is getting the data right, and then the second phase is using some of the fantastic functionality like digital assistant. And where we've done that, this is where we've seen those customers really loving it, and seeing the benefits through both from HR and the employees. And that's obviously ultimately our goal here at Oracle. So I love that journey approach. I think it's really interesting. And also I think, given where the question we got about, is is the local governments behind on their AI journey. I think it reflects what we're seeing on our survey, you know, that you don't have to think the moonshot. Actually, by being on these journeys and developing over time is the right place to be. So I think that's fantastic, to let our PPMA members know that that's really, they are on the right path, and you know, it's not one button and off we go. So just on that, you keep promising that you're going to tell us more about hiring, talent management and learning, and as HR, that's what we want to know about. So can you give us some examples of these features and functions that we are looking into?
Yeah, so in the HR space, I think of three primary themes. We're helping people to hire smarter. We're helping them to engage smarter. So recruiters helping recruiters to hire smarter. We're helping employees to engage smarter, and we're helping all employees, both HR professionals and employees, to work smarter as well. So, give you an idea of things we're doing in Hire Smarter. I've mentioned a couple of these already. We're focusing on saving recruiter time with where we know you have a stack of 200 CVs applying for a job. We'll stack rank them to enable the recruiter to start to focus on which are the first 50 or 20 that recruiter wants to look at. You know, we can also match those candidates to, if you've got a candidate you like, we can find other candidates who, based on their CV, look like that candidate. Or if you've got an employee who thinks an ideal role model for the candidate profile that you're trying to hire for, we can match candidates based on their CV to the employee. And again, I want to stress here, we're not trying to take the recruiting decision out of the way from the recruiter. We're just trying to take away some of the grunt work of working through a pile of 200 CVs to figure out the top 10 or 20 you want to go through the next stage of recruiting. We're also providing capabilities such as predicting time to hire when you open a job rec, so the recruiter can focus, you know, decide where they want to prioritize their time. And we can recommend compensation packages to land candidates when they join. In engaging smarter with the employee, we're helping them to progress their careers. We help them choose the right career path, and we can recommend learning paths to them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, I think, a bit later. And with all employees, we're helping them work smarter. I alluded earlier to smart actions, where we push actions, suggested actions to users, either when they log into the application or over a digital assistant, or over, if you're using a Slack channel, or even an SMS text message if you want to deploy it that way. And we're also automating workflows. So, for example, if a hiring manager is writing a job spec based on what the job title, we can recommend the skills that the hiring manager should consider including in that job spec as they write it.
I think that sounds amazing, and I know we talked about in the survey taking some of the grunt work. You know, if I think how many job specs I've had to write over my career, if someone could give me that prerequisite rather than me having to look them up from an old one and cut and copy it in, certainly got my vote. But that sounds like a lot, Clive. It really does. So we've talked about things like smart actions, recommended learnings, skills recommendations. How do you manage this as a team to make sure these pieces of the jigsaw fit together, to make sure that as it's delivered to the employee or the customer, it's a fantastic experience?
So that's a very good question. So first of all, from the data science perspective, let me talk about that. I'm going to throw out a few terms now, and I'll promise I'll go a step back from the tech after that. But let me talk about next best candidate, right? So that's the case where right now we're focusing on ranking the candidates based on their CVs against the job spec to help you do that initial triage. So that solution, our data scientist, is actually a really complex solution. We're using a combination of what's called natural language processing, which is a standard techniques for understanding from a piece of free text what's actually you mean by that, what's in there. We're using deep learning neural networks. For anybody who remembers Google Mind when they beat the Korean Go world champion, which was like a seminal moment a couple of years ago that made the news, a bit like when Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue back in the late 1990s. Well, the Google DeepMinds team, they use deep learning neural networks as part of the solution to beat the Korean Go world champion. And we're using a whole set of other machine learning algorithms as well. So our data scientists focus on building that part. But that's when we bring in our domain experts and application engineers to then seamlessly embed that in the application. And what's kind of frustrating for me from a selling perspective is that how does that manifest itself to a user? It manifests itself as I'm a recruiter, I go to a screen and I see a ranked list of potential candidates. It's frustrating to me in the sense of, do you know how clever we're being to give you that list of candidates under the covers? I don't want to bore you with deep learning neural networks and NLP and other machine learning algorithms, you know, stack ranking and learning to rank, but there's a lot of clever stuff going on. But in fact, the serious point there, actually, Kerry, is we don't want you to know what's going on. We just want you to use the application, and it's just intuitively being slightly smarter. And you won't necessarily, you'll be blissfully unaware that under the covers, there's some clever AI going on. Now going beyond the technical discussion though, in the case of that next best candidate, I'll use that as an illustration. We found that matching capability, matching a candidate's CV to a job description, is something that we can reuse elsewhere. So we've had to give it a name. This is an internal name. You won't see it on a slide anywhere. We call it Smart Match because it's just a slightly snappy way of us referring to it. So Smart Match is that matching capability. So we're now able to use exactly the same capability elsewhere. That's how we can, if an applicant comes to your job website, we can recommend jobs to them because then we're matching the job to the applicant based on their CV, the other way around. And that's how we also serve up things like, here's a candidate who looks like this other candidate you like. So we're building these capabilities that we can reuse in multiple places. Outside of hiring, we can also use Smart Match. It's the basis of how we recommend training courses to employees and how we recommend a benefits package to a candidate. So there are tons of reuse cases for Smart Match under the covers that we're also deploying.
Sounds imminently sensible, and I can certainly see the link of Smart Match from CVs to training. You know, and I think that's great that we're using the technology to do that. I know when we're often in one-to-ones as managers, and we try and, you know, extend people's network out to ask about other experience. When someone says to me, what training course should I go on, it kind of fills you with dread because it's like, I don't have that infinite book of training courses in my head. So, you know, this is something that's absolutely perfect. You mentioned AI functionality and recommending skills in hiring. This I know is something that the local authorities are really looking into, blind hiring, and given the diversity and inclusion message. Can you give us a little bit more about what we're doing on that?
Yes, so I talked a moment ago about Smart Match, that matching capability we're using across lots of different HR scenarios. We've also focused very, very heavily on skills identification, and we've got a solution now we're calling Skills Assistant. And like Smart Match is used in a number of places. So what is Skills Assistant? Essentially, it's an inventory of skills with an ontology. There I go again, I've thrown a techie word in. What is an ontology? The ontology is a list of the skills associated with a job title in a job domain. Now that's great, but I can go between two organizations and the words they'll use for the same skills will be different, and the titles they'll use for the same job will be different. So in addition to that list of skills associated with a job title in a job domain, we have synonyms, or different ways that people describe those skills and different ways people describe those job titles. That helps us to kind of normalize and have a common understanding language of skills and jobs across organizations. So what does that let us do? Let's take the example. Let's say we've got a certified public accountant in our organization. We'll know from our ontology and inventory of skills what skills that certified public accountant should have. And we'll know how that set of skills compares to the skills for an auditor or, say, a forensic accountant. So with that ontology of skills that's kind of organization independent of how each organization names them themselves, we can then, if we're hiring for a certified public accountant, that's why we can recommend the skills you should include in the job spec for that person. If that certified public accountant wants to become a forensic accountant, we know what the skills difference is between a certified public accountant and a forensic accountant. So then we can identify that skills gap. And then going back to our earlier solution, Smart Match, which we use for the matching of a skills gap to the courses to use. In the case of that CPA looking to become a forensic accountant, the skills assistant tells us the skills gap. Smart Match will then use the skills gap to tell us which learning courses we think that individual should go on in order to start to move towards their objective of becoming a forensic accountant. So in summary, in our HR solutions overall, we've got an underlying matching framework, Smart Match, which we use in a number of places for lots of different scenarios. We've got a skills identification solution called Skills Assistant, which we're using all over the shop in career development, talent management, and a number of other machine learning solutions as well.
I really love your explanations of this because I'm seeing now the jigsaw puzzle coming together for me. So fantastic that, you know, your team are looking at this and, as you said, doing the technical stuff under the covers, so, you know, people in HR don't have to think about what's these different types of skills for these roles. But also I think it's great that we often talk with local authorities about the use of digital assistants in help desks and HR help desks, and a lot of people that we work with obviously don't have English as a first language, so I'm assuming that we can use that type of functionality in terms of how people type questions and FAQs and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of internally, let me give you a couple of examples of that. So use of digital assistants in HR space. We've got Hilton Hotels in the US are improving their staff productivity with what they call Connie the chatbot. I don't know how it came to be called Connie, but that's the chatbot there. And they've deployed that to all their staff in their hotels across the US as an alternative way. You know, the employees can still log in through self-service to go and conduct self-service transactions, but many of them are on the go. They're on their phones. They may be more comfortable, especially with English not as first language, on a more kind of digital assistant dialogue. So through Connie the chatbot, Hilton Associates, as they're called, they can update their goals. They can provide anytime feedback in the performance management solutions. They can manage their absences, their time worked, and their manage their pay as a consequence as well. And so that's very much using a digital assistant to make self-service even more accessible to a dispersed mobile workforce. Another example would be Honeywell, who globally deployed a digital assistant to try and reduce their help desk calls. Quite astonishingly, I think, astonishing numbers. They reduced the number of help desk calls per year by 900,000.
Wow.
Their average call length that they cut back by was about 6.5 minutes. So they reduced help desk time by 140,000 hours. Now, when I heard those numbers, I thought I'm going to go and check them actually. So I did realise actually Honeywell's a pretty large organisation with a large global dispersed workforce. So actually, whilst at the beginning I thought that sounds absurdly high, that's on average reducing 6 help desk calls per employee per year, which is kind of very...
Honeywell, the heating people, aren't they?
Yeah, the heating and other automation stuff. So that's examples in digital assistant. I just want to throw in a couple of examples on the stuff that I talked about earlier around recruiting. So we're still early stages with customers on some of the other AI stuff, other AI solutions, but we've deployed Next Best Candidate to an organisation in the financial sector. Then they won't let me use their name yet, but they're seeing significant recruiter productivity gains from that just saving on that initial triage. That, the recruiter, rather than spending an hour a day looking at 200 CVs, decide the 20 to interview, that recruiter's spending 15 minutes on that, having looked at the ranking of candidates that we put to them first. And by the way, I want to stress at that point as well, we're not looking to replace people in that, right? We're just trying to reduce a lot of the work, but we still expect human beings to make the final decisions, because there are imponderables that we wouldn't ever claim the AI can resolve in those situations. And similarly, we've got some other customers deploying the same solution in media and banking. They're finding value, especially where there are high volumes of candidates for roles where work experience, skills and education are important. So we're seeing some good benefit there as well.
And I love the Honeywell example, because I know for the local authorities that, they have people that, are out and about, social services. So the use to be able to connect back into the office and the systems through a smartphone, I think is invaluable. So, it's great examples there. So just before we wrap up, is there anything else, Clive, you'd like to kind of give to our PPMA members before we kind of close off?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, in terms of AI, it's a very exciting time to be in AI, and it should be an exciting time for our customers and in the very near term. Where we're at as an organisation, I think where the industry's at is you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And hopefully, from what we've talked about, you can see that with capabilities like Smart Match and Skills Assistant, we've just built a lot of foundation that really enables us to start to really accelerate, and you should see a lot more capability coming from us now very, very rapidly. And I just want to close by remind, and I think the survey suggested this as well, so I think the PPMA folks are already well ahead of many others. But let's just remind people, AI is about empowering users, about removing that grunt work, that admin work, making their work more enjoyable, more rewarding, and freeing them up to do that more value-added strategic work. And if I can just end on one personal point. I'd just like to thank everybody from the PPMA. I know that, you know, through the COVID crisis, this has been an extremely tough time. And I just want to thank everybody in the public sector who's done an amazing job in whichever part of the public sector you're in to keep things working as well as they have. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I mean, so much work. We've obviously, for our existing customers, we've tried to help where we can, but you guys have been on the front line, taking the questions and dealing with citizens just to keep everything up and running, from emptying our bins and making sure people are kept safe through social services. So thank you so much for doing that. So thank you, Clive, always amazing. I always get to learn something new. You mentioned AI journeys, and we are going to finish with a video from Sarah from Buckinghamshire Council that's already considering her AI journey. Before we go, we just wanted to let you know that there will be an opportunity to answer some Q&A. We have Aaron Cross with you at the audience, and Lorena and Alvin. So when we finish off after the video, we'll be handing back to Lethem to take any questions that you have from the topics that we've shared with you. But before we go, let's just show you Sarah and her AI journey and where she's at. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sarah Murphy-Brookman. I work at Buckinghamshire County Council. We're currently going through the unitary process, so we will be Buckinghamshire Council from the 1st of April, and I will be the Director for HR and OD there as well. AI is really important to us. We understand it as digital HR at Buckinghamshire. I have a real ambition that we can bring this into our organisation as quickly as possible. So what I'm thinking about all the time from an HR perspective is how can we deliver a productivity dividend back? How can we make things simpler for our, whether it's service users or internal customers? So I'm looking at this through two lenses, from a HR delivery lens, but also what does that mean in terms of the broader place of Buckinghamshire? So we have health partners, what does it mean for our social workers internally, and so on. If we talk about what does it mean from an HR perspective, for me, what we need to think about is our internal customers, they use digital all of the time at home. So one of the things that I say, and I think my team gets fed up with hearing about this, is we book our holidays online, we do our online banking, we buy houses and so on. We come to work and actually it all just becomes too difficult and too complicated. So what we need is a retail experience, so that digital HR piece just becomes the normal way of doing things. Then people won't be resistant to the idea of self-serve and so on. So we need to make this a really, really great experience. We need to have it so people can do it at a time and a place of their choosing. They can do it on their mobile phones, on their iPads and so on. And what we've done is we've created a new HR portal that people will be able to access externally. So you'll just be able to look at it online. It won't be closed down or locked down, because we're really proud about this. It's part of our USP as an employer. So they'll be able to use that, and eventually when they go through, and it's really quite simple to use, and it hopefully answer their more common questions. If they get stuck, then it allows us to go into our internal knowledge management portal. If they're still stuck, they can raise a ticket within that, or they'll be taken through self-serve processes within it, so that they can transact it once. Wouldn't it be great if you don't have to come back to HR multiple times because it's too complicated? So, but if the query is really thorny, then we've got a service desk who can help them. And sitting behind there, we've got a series of HR specialist teams as well. But for me, that digital experience, it is core to everything that we do. It will make that fantastic user experience. It will make HR seem simple. Wouldn't that be joyous for all of us? And actually, it also means that we can then take all of that, as I say, that productivity dividend, we can either cash it in or we can redeploy it back into the things that the business really wants HR and OD to be doing. So that's what it means for me.